Good afternoon and welcome to the American Floral Endowment Grow Pro webinar series. My name is Ping Yu. I am a graduate of Texas A&M University where I received my PhD under Dr. Mengmeng Ge. I am now a postdoctoral research associate at the University of Florida focusing on weight management and continuum biochar research. I am serving as the moderator for today's session on heat delay in poinsettias. On behalf of the endowment, I'm excited to be a part of AFE's Grow Pro webinar series that features a new topic every month presented by an industry expert. The webinars are free to everyone thanks to our generous support of AFE sponsors. This session is sponsored by Duman Orange and Syngenta. Duman Orange provides the largest selection of superior flowers and plants by uniting the world's top breeders under one distinctive brand and blending traditional techniques and emerging technology. Syngenta helps growers transform the way crops are grown and protected to bring about positive, lasting change in agriculture. If you'd like to see all of our sponsors and their sites, or if you are a supplier and interested in becoming a sponsor for a topic, you can find that information on AFE's website at endowment.org/growpro. Today's session will be presented live in English. James Faust will join us following his presentation to answer questions that you might have. We encourage you to submit your questions through the Q&A feature or the chat. We will answer as many of your questions live as we can before the end of the hour. Any unanswered questions may be answered through a separate email exchange following the presentation. This session is being recorded and will be shared to AFE's YouTube account. Through YouTube's accessibility features, you will be able to access closed captions in other languages. Without further ado, I'd like to present today's expert speaker, James Faust. James teaches and does research on floriculture crops at Clemson University. He has been in the floriculture industry for 34 years. James originally started working on the effects of heat stress on poinsettia branching in the late 1980s and has studied various programs that affected poinsettias over the past several decades. Most recently, his lab has focused on understanding how high temperatures cause delayed flowering in poinsettias. As climate changes makes fall temperatures less predictable, the potential for heat delay of poinsettia flowering across the country is greater than ever. This research provides practical solutions to avoid heat delay so that you don't miss your targeted market dates. James, welcome you and thank you for presenting today on heat delay in poinsettias. You may take it away.
All right, thank you, Ping. Appreciate that. It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to speak with you today on this subject. We have been working in my lab for the last several years on heat delay, and we will show you the results from our projects. Mike Alden and Paul Miller have been the graduate students working on this project and will really responsible for the data that I think is really opened up our eyes and improved the clarity of understanding this phenomenon. So, one second. As Ping mentioned, with climate change, really the weather patterns are less predictable. The potential for heat delay is in more areas of the country than it used to be. I used to just think of this be a problem in perhaps the southeast and across the southern states, but these days I think it's less and less predictable as to what sort of fall weather patterns we will have. So we will try to show you today how your fall weather might potentially affect poinsettias and what you can do to alleviate some of the heat delay problems. So when we talk about heat delay, what we were specifically referring to is when poinsettia flower development is inhibited or delayed. As you see in the picture on the left is a normal poinsettia on the right is the same variety grown in the neighboring greenhouse, but at the same time, and here, just warmer temperatures, you have the cyathea developing more slowly, the bracts not greening or not turning red so well, and are delayed or just incomplete bract development. So when we refer to heat delay, this is what we're talking about. We are not talking about other effects that heat might have on plants, on poinsettias in particular. So for example, we have some poinsettia varieties that are very susceptible to high temperatures in terms of the morphology or the leaf appearance. You can get distorted leaves with high temperatures. You can get very poor branching as a result of high temperatures. So those are heat-related problems, but those are not the problems we're speaking of today. We're speaking solely on how heat affects really hitting your market date accurately. So there are 4 key factors that really influence heat delay and interplay and influence each other and interact to affect heat delay. And so we're going to talk about each of these individually, but the challenge is it's hard to speak about one of those factors without qualifying the response by talking about a second factor. So for example, we will talk about temperature and define temperatures that cause heat delay, but those temperature responses are modified by the photoperiod that the plants are experiencing or being delivered. They're also influenced by the stage of flowering. So not all weeks of the poinsettia flowering season are equally sensitive. And so we'll mostly differentiate between flower initiation and flower development. And then finally, there's a lot of variation amongst cultivars. So we have these 4 factors that all must be considered simultaneously when thinking about how heat can influence poinsettia flowering. But we'll try to take them one at a time, but recognize they will, the interaction of them is really the critical factor. So the first one that we'll consider is photoperiod, and we'll be speaking about photoperiod in terms of the night length, the duration of the dark period. And the first thing we'll talk about is what photoperiods or night lengths occur during natural photoperiods in the fall. And so if we look at a map here of the United States with the different latitudes, we will talk about night length responses at 25 degrees north latitude, 35, 45. So, 25, it's basically Miami, South Florida, 35 across the southeast here. I'm in South Carolina, all the way out to Southern California. 45 is the northern part of the country. Minneapolis goes through 45. And so when we show you the responses, this talking about 25, 35, and 45 degrees north latitude, that covers most of the country. You got some Pacific Northwest growers would be a little bit further north than 45. So what we'll show you now is then the night lengths that poinsettias actually perceive during the fall. And as you know, night length increases as the fall progresses. And we talk about night length perception because there's a point where the plant transitions from seeing day to seeing night. And this actually occurs in the morning before sunrise actually occurs. And plant perception of darkness starts after sunset. So if we look in the fall, what happens in 25 degrees north latitude, September 1st, we're looking at 11-hour night length. And then as you go into November, you're looking at only a night length at about 12.5 hours that the plants actually perceive. As you go further north, the 35 or 45 degrees left north latitude, the night lengths are shorter in the late summer and then longer in the early fall. So in Minneapolis, for example, you're looking at 10-hour, 15-minute night length in early September, getting up to 14 hours by the time the poinsettias are flowering. So a couple interesting points are that in the fall, when the the time that we're most interested in is when flower initiation is occurring. And for most varieties, that's going to occur basically about the 3rd week of September until the 2nd week of October. That's where most varieties are going to be actively initiating. Some earlier season might be a little bit early and some later go a little bit later, but this is when we're most interested. And if we look at the photo periods during that time, we're really only looking at a night length that is about 11 hours and 15 minutes up to a 12-hour and 15-minute night length. So that's not real long. And you'll see most parts of the country, or all parts of the country, have the same night length about the 27th, 28th of September. So every part of in North America, and it's going to be about 11 hours, 45 minutes or so in late September. And so again, latitude isn't going to make a big difference in terms of flower initiation because there's not that much difference during this period that we're mostly interested in. You know, there's big differences further out, but what we're really interested in is here, and the different latitudes don't affect night length that much, is the take-home message here. So if we then look at how fast flower initiation is occurring based on the night length. So we did an experiment, and we're showing you these data. So the optimal responses, these are poinsettias that are initiating very quickly. And if we think of it as a car driving, they're in 5th gear, going very fast. Here, when it's 0, they're not initiating at all. And then these in-between rates of progress are basically 1st, 2nd, 3rd gear. And under natural days, the night lengths, as we just showed you, are about 11.5 to 12.5 hours during flower initiation. And so at these night lengths, the plants are really not initiating very quickly. They are initiating, but you can see it's at, say, 20 to 60% of the maximum rate at which they can initiate. In comparison, if we are black clothing a poinsettia crop, we are providing a night length of 14 hours. And we would suggest that night lengths of any more than that are not beneficial. You don't get any benefit above with a night length longer than 14 hours, and you end up reducing the total amount of light the plants are perceiving. So having a 15 or 16-hour night length, we don't think there's much benefit to. So 14 is, if you're on a black cloth, that's where we would be. And what you see at a 14-hour night length, if we're black clothing a poinsettia, they are going to initiate much faster, twice as fast as if they were perceiving natural day lengths. Okay, so what that translates into, the flowering signal is much stronger. You're turning the switch on much more aggressively. It's like a drag race where you're immediately going into 5th gear in this car, going very fast if you take a plant that is vegetative and immediately give it 14-hour night length. In contrast, if you just let the plants naturally progress in September, early October, it's a car going 1st gear, 2nd gear, 3rd gear. It's kind of slowly ramping up. And so if the flower initiation is not as fast, and so that flowering signal is not as strong, and the take-home message is heat is going to have a bigger impact under a crop that is initiated under natural days versus a crop that's initiated under a black cloth system. Once initiation occurs, and an initiation will typically take 7 to 10 days, the effective photo periods above 12 hours, night lengths above 12 hours, is much diminished compared to the initiation. Again, at initiation, there's a big difference between initiating under 12, 13, and 14 hours. But once initiation occurs, this experiment shows you, we initiated these plants under all the same photo period, and then we let them develop under different photo periods. So night lengths of 11, 12, 13, and 14. So these basically had 10 days where they were black clothed, and then so initiation occurred, and then we let them develop under 11, 12, 13, 14 hours. And what you see is that there's very little difference in the appearance and timing of these crops between a night length of 12, 13, and 14 hours. So what this tells us is that night length is really critical for initiation, but then once we have initiated, once that meristem has transitioned from vegetative to reproductive, the night length is not so critical, meaning 14 hours is not that much, it doesn't provide you benefit over 13 or 12. So, and it ends up being heat delay. Initiation is also really the most critical part of the story for most varieties. So now looking at photoperiod, this is my most complex slide, so I hope you can bear with me, and I'll explain this. Again, we're looking at progress to flower, so very slow on the y-axis is 0, very fast is a 1, and then based on different temperatures, night temperatures here. If we have a 12-hour photoperiod, basically there's no difference between growing the plants at 68 or 74 in terms of how fast they initiate. Okay, but if we have temperatures up to 82, we delay initiation. Also, what you'll notice at 12 hours, we're not initiating very fast. We're only half the optimal speed of initiation here. If we go to a 13-hour photoperiod, regardless of temperature, the plants are initiating faster, but you still see this delay at 82 degrees versus 75, and a little bit of delay from 75 to 68. If we go to a 14-hour night length, black clothing, again, 12 hours is kind of what we're getting under a natural day crop in September, October. 14 hours is what we get if we're black clothing. If we black cloth, you can see the initiation is occurring much faster at all of these temperatures, whether it's hot or cool. So if we pick out a few specific points here, the worst case scenario would be 12-hour night length and 82 degrees. Okay, that's the slowest progress to flower. And so that would be natural days when it's hot. If we black cloth and it's still hot, we get a promotion of flower initiation. Flower initiation is occurring faster even though it's hot. Okay, so long night lengths overcome heat stress somewhat. This is still not an optimal rate of initiation, but it's better than if we were down here. So black clothing helps. Other interesting point is if we could compare this black cloth crop that's hot, 82, versus a cooler temperature, but it's still 12-hour night length, so natural day length sort of initiation conditions. And what you see is actually better to be hot and black cloth than to be cooler and natural days. So black clothing can really help. It's still not quite as good as this would be the optimal condition where you had a 14-hour night and you were cool. So that's where we get the best. But of course, that's very difficult to get 68-degree temperatures when it's hot out in the fall. So that would be ideal, but we can't often achieve that cool. If it's the moral of the story is if it's going to be hot, black clothing helps. Okay. Next point, just looking specifically at temperatures there, is that during natural day flowering, meaning they're initiating in September, natural day length's about a 12-hour night length, and average daily temperature is really the most critical measure of heat stress. And so during initiation, cooler temperatures are better. And this shows you plants that were initiated at these temperatures. Again, they provide these temperatures for basically 2.5 weeks. And then all the plants moved to the same environment, same temperatures for the development part of the flowering. And so what you see is the cooler the plants were during initiation, the better they flowered. The earlier they flowered, more color development they got at an earlier point. So again, under natural day lengths, 12-hour night lengths roughly, cooler temperatures are better for initiation. Now, it's probably not practical that we're going to have 64 degrees in late September, but if we did, that average daily temperature is beneficial. If we were black clothing this crop, so we were actually creating a 14-hour night length, then night temperature is actually the temperature that is most critical to measure. Where we see delay is related to the night temperature, not so much the average daily temperature. So this graph shows you plants that initiated under different temperatures at a 14-hour night length. And again, 61 to 68 look pretty equal. You start getting above 68 and you delay flower development, or flower initiation, excuse me, which results in the plant flowering at a later date. So we will use the target of 72 Fahrenheit is kind of our cutoff, where we want to be less than or equal to that at night temperatures if we're black clothing. Okay, but if we're initiating under natural days, then really it's ADT, average day temperature, that is the more critical temperature to look at. If we're black clothing, night temperature is the more useful measure of heat stress. The third thing now is the stage of flowering, comparing initiation versus development. So initiation we're defining as when that meristem in the shoot tip is transitioning from a vegetative thing producing leaves to producing a terminal cyatheum, or the true flower. And so if you zoom in on the shoot tip, it kind of looks like this. The vegetative meristem is this dome, and then this is a leaf primordium. And then when that dome starts transitioning from producing more and more leaves to actually producing a terminal cyatheum, so this is a flower that's buried in the shoot tip, that's what we're calling initiation. That process takes 7 to 10 days typically. 64 is optimal. Cooler is better. So if you actually have a really cool September, you're going to get earlier flower initiation than if you have a moderate temperatured fall, and certainly moderate temperatures are better than hot temperatures for initiation. So as ADT increases, time to initiate flowers increases. Keep in mind that when initiation occurs will vary with variety. So in general, early season varieties are going to initiate earlier. So we're most interested in temperatures that are occurring about the second, third, even fourth week of September. Those are the real critical weeks. For mid-season varieties, you're looking at initiating the middle to late September. Late season varieties, the end of September into early October. So if you have a late season variety, for example, and you have heat stress in early September, it doesn't make any difference. It's not trying to initiate. But if you have heat, high temperatures in late September, early October, you can be affecting the late season varieties, but you might not be affecting the early season varieties because they have already initiated. So the timing of initiation is important as to when the heat stress occurs. So the fourth piece is that cultivars vary in their sensitivity. And so most, I would say all, but we haven't tested all of them. But so we'll say most cultivars have some degree of heat sensitivity during flower initiation. Okay. However, our data suggests that only the really heat sensitive varieties continue to be sensitive throughout flower development. So initiation is always important. Development varies with the cultivar a lot more. And why we say that is because we've done, this is an example of an experiment that we did. We used 4 varieties, Advent, Tikal, Freedom, and Prestige, recognizing those aren't hugely important varieties for a lot of growers these days, but the varieties that we have a lot of historical data on, so it makes it, as a guinea pig plants, they're better for us to work with because we know them better. So what we did was we grew these varieties and then we provided 1 week of heat stress, and our heat stress temperature was 82 degrees. So that was day and night. And so the average daily temperature was 82 degrees. Let me get my cursor. And so we would provide a heat stress on the week of September 11th to some plants, and then put them back under nice temperatures. We take another group of plants and give them heat stress September 18th and that whole week. So each week of this season, we had a group of plants that we provided heat stress to. The idea is then we could identify what weeks are we really sensitive to that heat stress. And these are a generalization of the data. So for Advent, it's a very early season variety. The week of September 11th, heat during that week delayed anthesis when the Cyathea reached pollen. Bract color continued to be affected by the week of September 18th and the last week of September. So basically there were 3 weeks there that we affected flowering on Advent. And we would consider Advent to be a very heat tolerant variety, but it still is sensitive during those early weeks. Now, if we did heat stress October 2nd and beyond, no problem, those plants look normal. To call, we had a broader area that we affected anthesis, and then several weeks where we affected Bract color. Freedom shifted a little bit to the right. Prestige, which we know to be a sensitive variety, so kind of Advent and Prestige are the bookends. Advent's pretty tolerant, Prestige is very sensitive. We could affect anthesis with heat stress on any 6 of these weeks. Bract color, any 5 of these weeks. So from late September to late October, high temperatures would causing delay or of Bract color and anthesis on Prestige. We'll show you what those plants look like, which will make it all make a little bit more sense, hopefully. So this is our Advent data. We took pictures of plants on each of these weeks in October, November, and then on the bottom here are the week that the plants received a high temperature stress. So on the left here is the control. So these guys never were exposed to high temperatures. They always were given temperatures in the mid 70s, basically. Yeah, like 72 to 76. So those are normal. And then these guys got a heat stress for this early week, and you can see the no effect. These guys, the third column, had a heat stress during this week, and you can see these are a little delayed, but statistically, when the plants flowered, these we could not show were any different than the control. Then where the red rectangle is, those are the 3 weeks that the previous slide showed you, where there was a significant delay to anthesis or Bract development. And so those weeks, the plants were sensitive. They weren't, the delay wasn't a whole lot, but there was delay. And then heat stress in these dates in October had no effect on Advent at all. We'll show you Freedom. You see the pictures are the same times, or show you the same treatments across the bottom. But what we have here is the rectangle has been shifted a week, and it's also broader. So there are 4 weeks that we were particularly sensitive, from mid-September to mid-October. And there was, you can see the significant delay in Bract color. Now we'll show you Prestige, and now we have even broader. We show more weeks that are affected, and the delay was a bigger delay also. And so you can see what happens here. Again, high temperatures in September didn't do a whole lot of damage to Prestige until we hit September 25th, because it is initiating later. And so those were the weeks that were sensitive. And it wasn't just sensitive during these early weeks of initiation, but during the developmental weeks. And here there is also significantly delayed. Okay. So that's the big picture. Temperature, photoperiod, stage of flowering, and cultivars are the things we're looking at, and those all impact flowering. And so now we'll say, well, what do you do about, you can't always change the temperatures, right? So what can you do? So these are our take-home messages, our best management practices. Number 1, choose heat tolerant cultivars. That's by and large the best thing you can do to solve any potential problems. So we'll show you a list of, this is Doom and Oranges from their trials. They do heat stress trials annually in Texas. And so here are early season varieties that they show that when they get hot seasons, the delay is much less than most other varieties, and then mid-season varieties that are relatively tolerant to heat delay. We're not listing late season varieties because if you're really concerned about heat delay, late season varieties probably aren't good choices at all, because just a little bit of delay, because they're already flowering fairly late into November and into early December, any delay kind of pushes you out of the wholesale market. So you probably wouldn't do late season varieties if you're really concerned about heat delay, because any little bit of delay will get you miss your market. And then we have a selection from Syngenta. They do annual heat stress trials and evaluations in South Florida. And they categorize their varieties a little more differently. So there's very early season, early, mid, and mid. And then they'll have different categories. So excellent and very good in terms of their tolerance to heat stresses. So you can see those are choices that are nice, reliable plants that, if you perform well in South Florida, you're probably not anywhere else in the country going to be any hotter than that. So the good, reliable options. Our second best management practices would be to black cloth when possible, and realizing that most growers are not going to be able to do this. But if you do have black cloth as an option, or you want to grow a variety like Prestige that is a nice variety, or you want to grow another heat sensitive variety, and you have a little bit of black cloth, well, put the sensitive varieties in the black cloth system and do the heat tolerant varieties in the natural day system. And typically we'd say that by October 10th to 15th, you're safe to stop black clothing. Obviously, if you're getting some really hot temperatures at that time, I would continue to black cloth, but you don't have to black cloth all the way through November, just during the hot period, and mostly get you through those really early sensitive weeks for most varieties. Our third best management practice would be to maintain the coolest possible average daily temperatures during flower initiation. This is if you're initiating under natural day conditions. And so those weeks for most varieties are going to be about the third week of September through the early second week of October. Most all varieties are going to have some degree of sensitivity during that time. And so you do your best to get it cool in the facility at that time. So that means running, well, and before I go to the next slide, we have a little bit broader period if you want to really incorporate all varieties. So, September 10th, we're not getting a lot of initiation for most varieties at all before then, and in the middle of October, so kind of a week earlier than this category and a week later. So it gives you basically a month from mid-September to mid-October. Pretty much all cultivars would be initiating during those times. And then the fourth point, and I want to say for maintaining cool temperatures, that might mean you're running your evaporative pad through the night even, keeping it as cool, because you're looking at under natural days, it's the average daily temperature that's important. So if you can get it cooler at night, that's important. If you can get it cooler in the day, that's important too. So every hour of the day is important. And even though the night may be cool, you might try to get it even a few degrees cooler would be beneficial, because you're trying to bring that ADT down another degree or two, can make a big difference. Okay, and the fourth point being that you can adjust temperatures based on your first color and visible bud date. So we'll talk about this with a couple more slides. So what we're basically going to say is here, once initiation occurs, the optimal temperature for development is an average daily temperature, usually in the mid 70s, where you don't have heat delay, but because you've gotten past initiation, now you're wanting the flowers to develop quickly. And so that requires warmer temperatures than the temperatures that you initiated the plants under. We'll elaborate on that here. So you have flower initiation in roughly mid-September starting. In mid-October to late October, you're starting to see visible bud and first color. So you have basically a month from initiation to those two visible events. And then you've got another month until the plant is mature. So if your timing to visible bud and first color is on time, it's normal. Your varieties are reaching first color when they're supposed to, you're kind of home free. You know that you're going to have, flowering in 4 to 5 weeks after that. If you see delay in these events occurring, then you're going to be delayed for flowering. And so what you can do is compensate. So if you are a week late for visible bud or first color, you can actually grow the plants warmer at the end to get faster development. So you're warm enough that they're developing fast, and it's also during a period where they're going to be less sensitive to warm temperatures. So we developed this BRAC meter many years ago, so you can go online and just Google Poinsettia BRAC meter, and you'll see it. But what this basically shows you, it gives you a guide for kind of bringing the plants in on time based on how much BRAC development there is. So there are 5 varieties here, and these are older varieties because we did this a while ago, but we didn't see any difference in varieties, and we just pictured 5 here, so you had a lot of pictures to look at. But we think these are going to hold true for any varieties today still. The idea is that you can look at the plant and how much red color there is, and you can predict how many more days for that plant to reach its market date based on the temperatures. And we only show temperatures up to 70 here, but if you go up a little warmer than that, you can get a little bit faster. So the idea is if you look for first color and it's delayed, then you should be trying to grow as warm as possible from first color to full flower. Okay, if your first color date is right on time, then you can finish your crop at your normal temperatures. You can again use these charts to see if your crop is coming in fast enough based on the temperatures you plan on finishing them at. So I will say you get nicer quality plants when you finish them cooler. The color is better, a little bit more compact. And at warmer temperatures, the color of the bracts is not as nice, but you can live with a little bit of faded bract if it's on time than having a plant that comes in a week or 2 late. So again, this gives you a tool for having confidence once you've reached first color, whether you're using the right temperatures to bring the plants into maturity. All right, so quick summary. We basically have 3 times of a poinsettia season that we're really interested in. There's the initiation period, which is typically mid-September to early October, and you want the average daily temperature to be as cool as possible. Cool temperatures at that time, flowers will initiate faster. And so that means using evaporative cooling, then that's good, as many hours as you need to. So we're transitioning that meristem, and this is when the plants are going to be most sensitive to the heat. Then you have development, and we'll divide development into 2 stages, from early October after initiation to first color visible bud. And at these times, you want the average daily temperature to be less than 77. You want the night temperatures to be less than 72, so that this stage develops normally. Higher temperatures than that, you're going to expect a little delay. Then you reach first color or visible bud, and the number of days to market you can anticipate using this BRAC meter, so that you reach first color and you can say, okay, based on how much color I have in my greenhouse here on the 3rd, 4th week of October, I can control what temperature I'm growing the plants so that I reach flowering at the right time. I can speed it up with warmer temperatures. I can slow it down with cooler temperatures. And at this time of year, you're talking about, late October, early November, most often you're going to have some decent temperature control, so you have some options available to you. Early on, you're at the mercy of nature. You can't create a 64-degree greenhouse if it's 80 degrees outside. But later on, you have some tools here to accelerate flowering or decelerate flowering. All right, so that is the message. I would like to acknowledge the USDA Ag Research Service Floriculture Nursery Research Initiative for funding this project. And we appreciate the sponsorship of Doom and Orange and Syngenta for this webinar series. And with that, I will turn it back over to Ping.
Hey, Jim, thank you so much for your presentation. This was extremely informative. Now I'd like to, before anything that, please if you are interested, please register our additional Grow Pro sessions next week. The next one would be on Tuesday next week at 1 p.m. Eastern. So please register from this website. And now I'd like to open up to the Q&A session. If you have any questions, please ask. Can I ask you a question, Jim?
Sure.
You mentioned the heat might delay the poinsettia, but how many days of heat are needed for delayed flowering?
Yeah, so if you're, during the critical period in late September, early October, and you have, 1 day of heat, does that translate into 1 day delay? That depends on the variety. If you take a heat tolerant variety, typically, say a week of heat, 7 days of really high temperatures, may delay the plant 3 or 4 days. You take a sensitive variety, and 1 week of heat can actually translate into more than 1 week of delay. So, 7 days where the ADT is 82 degrees, you may end up with 10 days of potential delay. So it's not a straightforward 1 day of heat gives you 1 day of delay. It does depend on the variety, and the more sensitive the variety, the bigger the impact of the heat.
Okay, we got a question. Well, it's a comment. So he's asking you for a comment. Would you please comment on the difference between the delay management and the different management on poinsettia?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that.
So someone asked from the Q&A session, would you please comment on the difference between heat delay management and the different management on poinsettia?
Sure. So diff is the effect of day and night temperature on stem elongation. So if you have warm days, cool nights, you promote stem elongation. Cool days, warm nights, you inhibit stem elongation. So what we're showing is that for flowering, the average daily temperature, the 24-hour temperature, is what is the important temperature to measure, regardless of the diff. Doesn't matter how you deliver the day and night temperature. The average daily temperature is what is important if you're flowering the crop under natural day lengths. If you're flowering the crop under black cloth systems, so you have a 14-hour night length, then the night temperature is actually the thing that has the biggest impact on flowering. So, so if you were trying to provide a negative diff, which was cool days, warm nights, you have to be careful. You really don't want night temperatures higher than 72. You don't want a large negative diff, and that higher night temperature can delay flowering. I think that's what you were asking.
Okay, and we have another question. Can black clothing actually increase heat delay due to the high temperatures building up upon the curtain?
Yeah, so this is always a concern when we do black cloth, in the early evening, and it's a sunny day. the sun hitting the black cloth can cause the greenhouse to heat up or the plants under the black cloth to heat up. And so this is a potential concern because if you have higher night temperatures, you're going to delay flowering. So ideally what you would do if you're black clothing is that you provide the black cloth while the sun is out. So you say pull the black cloth at 6 p.m. and then once sunset has occurred, let's say that's at 7 o'clock or 7:30, then you open the curtain system back up so that you're actually only black clothing during the photo period. And then this will allow the heat to dissipate out of the greenhouse. And so the plants will experience a cooler environment. So ideally, you don't keep the heat trapped under the curtain all night long. You open up the curtain back up, and then if you need blackout curtain in the morning, again, you pull the curtain before sunrise occurs so the plants don't see the sun. And in the morning, heat buildup is really not much of an issue. So ideally, you open the curtain system back up at night.
And we have another question. Would a shade curtain overhead at sunrise and sunset affect flower initiation?
Yeah, this is an interesting point. I don't know that anybody has ever done this. We have made some good measurements and suggest this is something interesting and useful. So if you have shade cloth on the greenhouse at sunset, then it's darker in your greenhouse than if you didn't have shade cloth on. And so therefore the plants perceive darkness a little bit earlier than if you did not have the shade curtain on. So if you have the shade curtain on, so it's 50% shade, for example, that means you're reducing the light intensity in the greenhouse by 50%. And so you are affecting the plant's perception of night length because the plants will perceive darkness earlier in the evening and later in the morning. So shade cloth, like a 50% shade cloth, will create a longer night by 5 to 10 minutes, which isn't a lot, but it is a few days, so that the plants you would expect to initiate a few days earlier than if you were not shade clothing. So, so to have intentionally provide some shade at sunrise and sunset could allow you to actually initiate or start the initiation process a few days earlier, which may be some real value if a few days make a difference at the end. Sure.
All right. Thank you for joining us today for another session of AFE's Grow Pro webinar series. We encourage you to review our full calendar at endowment.org/growpro. While you are there, check out our past webinar recordings, other grower-related resources, and research reports available to you free thanks to the industry support. Our next webinar will be using biological and chemical control to manage whiteflies in greenhouse on Tuesday, August 13th at 1 p.m. Eastern. You can register from the link in the chat. We ask that you please complete the brief survey about today's session. Your feedback will help us continue to improve the monthly webinars and provide additional topics of importance. Thank you for joining us today and have a great day.